Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. The Practical Guitarist Podcast is brought to you by Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Great Lakes Guitar Pickups provides fantasy tones at prices a practical guitarist will love. Featuring top-notch construction, attention to detail, and a fully custom product, if you can dream it, Great Lakes Guitar Pickups can probably build it. Follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Are you a regular listener? Why not? David here reminding you of all the ways you can participate in the Practical Guitarist Podcast. Subscribe using your chosen podcast app. Review us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Practical Guitarist or on Twitter as @PractGuitarist. Support the show. Merchandise is available in our Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. And donate to us via Patreon, available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. Reach out to us directly via email at questions@practicalguitarist.com. Hi, Jim.
Hi, David. Hi, Max.
Hey.
Yeah. So do you want to introduce yourself or do you want us to introduce you?
I'll introduce myself.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, cool. Go for it.
Hey, everybody. I'm Max Carlisle, and I'm a guitarist on YouTube and also a guitarist in real life. And I play in a few bands, and I play in Halen, which is an 80s metal band. And I've got a really weird power metal project called Raptor Command, the heavy metal tribute to Elon Musk.
Yes.
And then I do a whole bunch of YouTube videos. I review guitars and amps and original solo music and all that good stuff. Playing guitar in 2019.
Yeah, man. So you just had surgery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I had an injury to my left arm. I completely tore my left bicep tendon.
And how's your recovery going? Are you back to playing yet, or?
I am back to playing, and actually the recovery is going really good. It's going about as good as I could really hope for. It's not, my left arm is still real weak compared to my other arm, but at least I can play guitar again, and it hasn't. I'm not going to have any permanent damage from it, I'm real happy about that.
Wow. I always found that to be like the most frightening thing. Like in the back of my mind is like, what if I do so? Because I used to skateboard like when I first started playing guitar, and I quit because I was playing guitar. Because I just had this like realization one day, like if I fall and I break my wrist or something, I'm not gonna be able to play anymore, or I could have permanent damage. So I mean, it's cool to hear that you're recovering, and I'm glad to hear that. And I'd seen some of your videos where you've been playing since then, but I know you'd done some pre-recorded stuff, so I wasn't sure. But yeah, dude. So in preparation for this episode, I went back and I watched some older videos, and like I think you're a perfect fit for a guest on this show for a number of reasons. So this is obviously the Practical Guitarist, right? And so we try to make practical gear decisions. And for most people who like, if you're not a touring musician, right, a lot of the gear you show on your show is like more in the vein of like what people that kind of are on a budget like would be looking at.
Yeah, I thank you. I mean, I agree with that. As cool as full stacks and 120 watt tube amps are, we all love that stuff, but are you really gonna use it? I mean, other than just to get street cred, right? I mean, most of the time, even in a rehearsal, which rehearsal is often the loudest you're gonna play, even in a rehearsal, you're not going to get an amp like that past 3 or 4 on the volume or something like that at best, And so, yeah, the lower wattage amps or solid state amps, digital amps, things like that have a wider variety of uses. I think that's really what a lot of people are really looking at these days, and that's what I try to show people.
Well, just looking at like the Joyo stuff, like that's really big because for me, like growing up, I was always into the Boss stuff because I was, I didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, and that was the cheap stuff, right? and I see like Joyo and brands like that being the boss of today. You know, similar designs in a lot of cases. Like it's very much like a clone of something that already exists, or a modified version of something that already exists. And now they're starting to come out with like unique stuff. But I think it's really cool that you provide a voice for those companies, because like without so the Chinese marketplace, and a lot of times like a lot of these stuff is coming out of the Far East like that, doesn't have the marketing capital here in the United States, so they have to partner with people and whatever to get their name out. And so like that's how you get into situations like is it Wong's amps, where you know they've got like a face, is that Darren Kalish, the guy on Facebook that like everybody knows is the Wong's guy, right? But like they have to find people to rep their company here in the United States in order to I hate to say it like this, but like push their product. And I mean, if you're going to be that guy, like you're the face of it, and you put like a really positive face on it. Like I can watch your stuff and not feel like I'm being sold something that really doesn't live up to the hype. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and you have to be careful when you're doing it, for sure, because you could easily rep something that's just junk. I mean, there is stuff out there that's really, it's a copy of something that's cool, but they just didn't copy it very well. There's a lot of pedals that are like that, especially. Fortunately, most of the amps I've run across are pretty legitimately cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to be careful. You know, you don't want to just be like, "Hey guys, check this out," and everybody buys it, and then the thing doesn't work, and then it's not a good thing.
Well, as far as the amps are concerned, I mean, I imagine like China still produces tubes, and they have a lot of tube technology left over there, so they probably have people that actually know, because that's the problem here in the United States, right? Like, and parts of Europe, is that tube technology exists, but it's so esoteric that there's like not a place you can go to learn it anymore. And so a lot of it's just kind of passed down knowledge, or people reading these old books and not really get it, and maybe not grasping all the concepts and like going through the full design engineering process that people go through to like learn to do that stuff. And I've heard that from people like James Brown, the guy that designed the 5150. He talked about it because he was like on that cusp of solid state engineering and tube engineering when he went to school for it. And I think China would have like a stronger grasp on how to deal with tube electronics, heat dissipation, and all those things that were a bigger issue in those kinds of designs.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think you mentioned something a little bit ago that's really important, and that is that a lot of these companies started out by copying existing designs. And so when they're in that phase, maybe they don't exactly have that grasp. But now you see these companies pushing the designs further, and they're bringing out new products that's not a copy of anything else. And that's something that I'm really happy to see, because like what you're talking about with tube technology, it's not impossible that there is still, we haven't quite found the boundaries of those things yet. There's still progress to be made on that front. And so now some of those companies really are doing that, and they're pushing the envelope of, on one hand, it's a relatively old technology, but on the other hand, there's still some progress to be made there. So I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, one of the ones that I was looking at today was the Bernie, BURNI or BURNY, and that was one of the ones you had talked about where trademark laws were keeping those guitars from getting into the States. And what you played was a pretty cool Les Paul style guitar with the Sustainiac type pickups and that type of thing. Just pushing an old guitar, because let's face it, the Les Paul buyers, as Gibson has kowtowed or bent over and said, okay, that's what we'll do. They still want the one that's like the 50s. They want the exact same thing. They don't want any changes. Where at least a new company can say, okay, we're putting this out here, but we're putting it out for people. We're not aiming it at you older people that don't want any change. We're aiming at somebody who wants to go further, wants to push the limits, wants to go ahead of where they are now.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you look at the comments that I got on that video, there are a ton of the purist crowd in there, and they say, "Oh man, get those electronics out of that Les Paul." It has a Floyd Rose bridge on it, which is even worse, right? It's
that thing looks really cool. I was like super interested in it when I saw it. I was like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, that guitar is awesome. It's 22 frets. Maybe I could even push it to 24. That's really the only thing I would change on it to get the 2 octaves on there. But
Yep.
that Floyd Rose on there and the sustainer setup, and the thing plays so nice. It's nice, not too big of a neck, real comfortable neck on it. The whole guitar itself is not terribly heavy. I mean, it's not light, but it's not Les Paul heavy either. So yeah, man, I mean, I love that guitar.
But as far as like, so I see, because you're firmly kind of like in the metal shred camp, right? And like, I think that's another key element of what makes your channel work, is because there's a lot of, so we see all these YouTube guys, and Jim and I just had a conversation on the last episode, or the episode prior, where we were talking about one particular individual who does a lot of work for well, he doesn't do a lot of work, but I mean, like, what he does is he makes these videos about specific devices, and he does kind of like a review channel, right? But he's like a dyed-in-the-wool P-dubber, and we see a lot of that, and that's fine. I mean, I get it, like, that's a big segment of the market, but it's really cool and refreshing to see somebody who's like repping basically old school, like 80s metal kind of stuff, and because that's my slant on things. Like, Jim knows that's kind of where I come in.
I just want to barge in for just a second to say that when it comes to that, you don't just talk it, you do it. I mean, listening to your shredding and your playing, you are out there actually doing this stuff, not in the bedroom, not, overdubbing and overdubbing and overdubbing. You're playing this stuff for real and doing it really well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny what you mentioned, David, about the audience and what people want to hear and what they want to see. I think that the whole 80s shred movement, I think that really still has a lot more traction sometimes than what we give it credit for. Something that was kind of sort of an epiphany I had a while back is that a huge amount of people who are listening to guitar music and watching guitar videos and all this stuff, they might not actually be guitar players themselves. They're just guys who are thinking about playing, like they would like to play someday or something like that.
Right.
And, it's actually a relatively small portion of the audience that are like hardcore players who are just like playing all the time. That's a pretty small portion of the audience. So when I try to do something, I try to present something that is accessible, to a lot of people, and to people who are not players themselves. They're like, well, that's the kind of thing I would like to play. So I feel like when you head more towards the sort of traditional rock guitar that's, ends up being really heavily blues based and that kind of stuff, I think that's what really most people want to, when they imagine a guitar player in their head, like, I'd like to play guitar someday, I'd like to be a guitarist. That's really the kind of stuff that they have in their head.
Yeah, I can remember, like, because I'm not as old. I'm not that old, right? I'm only like 34 years old. I think of myself as being a lot older than I am, right? I'm celebrating Father's Day because I am a father. But I'm laughing because, like, you're saying that, and I can remember when I was younger, just like wanting to be Led Zeppelin, like, and play like Jimmy Page stuff all day long. And then somebody brought over a videotape of Yngwie Malmsteen, and I had like never heard of him, and I just sat there and I went, why am I even trying? Like, what? Why am I even trying? Actually, I think I heard a CD first. He brought over a CD first, and then he brought over the videotape, because I heard the CD and I was like, how is he even doing that? Like, I knew that Van Halen did the tapping thing, and I'm like sitting there trying to figure out Yngwie riffs via tapping, and I'm like, this is just insane. Then he brings over the video, and I'm like, now I get it. I need to quit, But I can play a lot of that stuff now. But I mean, it's one of those things where you have that epiphany moment, and that's where people rise to people like Paul Gilbert, Michelangelo Baudio, and all those guys. Who, by the way, Michelangelo Baudio was on the show a couple months ago. So for any listeners who are listening to this and haven't heard that episode, you might want to go back and listen. It was a great interview. So really fun time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd like to listen to that too.
Yeah, he was. Well, so he's actually. So I'm here in Chicago, right? So he's up on the north side. And it was really funny because I got to see him the night that he was on the episode in this little bar, like right around the corner from my house. Like, I literally walked to the bar. I mean, it was that close. I'm in the burbs too, so it's not even like a city club or anything like that. And there was maybe 30 people there, and most of them were like the other bands that were playing that night. So I got to stand like right next to him and like, basically, see everything he was doing all night long, including him being his own roadie and all that stuff. And it was super cool because like you get to see a guy that most other people don't go through that. So in the interview, he talks about the fact that here in Chicago, he can't sell out a venue for whatever reason. It's like everybody in Chicago has already seen him. They don't want to go see him again. But he'll go to some place like Minneapolis and he'll fill a small, like a small theater. It's just crazy. But yeah, it's a cool interview because he has some really good stories to tell.
Oh yeah,
one in particular about a fan. Wait for that one.
Yeah, you'll like that one.
Okay. I've talked to him a lot. I mean, I've known him for years. And
oh yeah, I remember I saw you did an ad like early on for like your lessons or something, and because I'd gone back and watched all that stuff like a while ago, and I think you mentioned him in there, and I was like, yeah, I could see that, that you and you'd studied under him too, right? I mean, that's my understanding. Like you learned, at least use lesson material or whatever.
Yeah, I used his lesson material for sure. I mean, he played like a guest solo on an EP or actually a instrumental album that I did way back in like 2010 or something like that.
Oh, awesome.
Michael Badio is a really fascinating case because I think sometimes he gets a lot of flack for not doing more like band stuff. Mm-hmm. And although he does do some of that, but most of what he does is guitar clinics and kind of one-man show kind of stuff. But man, I mean, he has had a long career for decades, flying all over the world to these places that really, really want to see him. I mean, if you go through and you find some footage of him playing in India and places like that, they're going berserk, And so, why would you, there's a lot of guys I know, a lot of great guitar players who are touring guitar players out with bands that can't even afford to have their own apartment back in Los Angeles when they come home.
Yeah,
like
I know
Michael is.
Yeah, Michael Impellitteri is one of them, right? I mean, he's a guy that's like huge in Japan and stuff. And so, who's the other guy? Marty Friedman's that way. Like he's not huge here in the States. He does tour here in the States, but like he's way bigger in Japan.
Well, I mean, I just meant that Michael Badio. I mean, I know he's making real good money doing those clinics.
Oh yeah,
and it's like, why would you ever give that up? Why would you? So I think for him, it would actually be a step backwards to like join a band and go on tour most of the year, that kind of stuff. I think he would have less freedom as an artist and probably be making less money. And
he actually put a band together. That's what was crazy. The night I saw him, he had a full band. Like he wasn't playing the tracks.
Awesome. Did he have? Was it that female lead singer?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
I forget what her name is, but he was touring that band. Like
Excellent.
it was their second tour. So I think the first tour was like a European thing, and then she came to the States with him, and like they put together another band, and they were doing a tour, and I think they'd recorded a record or something. So like it was very different because I know people have told me like, oh yeah, he does the clinic thing. And it was not a clinic. Like he played music that, like, it was basically, he described it as being a jam band, right? And they were very much like going off the written page and stuff. And it was fun to see him kind of like cut loose because I know he's usually got a pretty specific show regimen. But that probably comes from the fact that he's a music historian.
Well, that and the fact that when you're playing with tracks and Andy was doing stuff with that double neck or that quadruple neck that you saw, you pretty much got to have that worked out. There's not a whole lot of.
He did new stuff on that too. He said that was the first time he'd altered that whole thing in like a long time. He's actually written new material for the double neck, and yeah, so it's cool. Like I mean, you've probably obviously seen him. I like he's a good draw, and I think everybody should go see these guys every once in a while because, like, let's face it, a lot of that artistry is, I wouldn't say it's dead. Guitar has changed. Like it's not the way it was in like 1991, when
Sure.
these guys were running around in their heyday. And I mean, even Vi talked about, he's like, I really want to sit down and make the proper guitar record because he doesn't feel like he's really done a record where he like, basically does nothing but make sure that like his guitar work is the best that it can be. Because he knows that he's going to get to the age where he can't do it anymore. Like he's physically unable to do it. So he's kind of concerned about it. And
that's something that I just read about Frampton. So Frampton's touring right now, and that's the same thing. He's going through that where this is it. he knows that he is like what just happened to you, Max. Something a lot worse, obviously, happened to Frampton. He's not going to be able to come back from it. So he's doing his final tour, and he knows that he isn't going to be able to play, at that level anymore. And it's kind of sad, for him, but there's got to do.
I was fortunate to get to see him too. He had a good show.
Yeah.
I've never seen Frampton. I should try to make a point to.
Yeah, because this is his final tour. If you get a chance to go see him, you should.
Yeah, it's a physical reason, so it's not like Ozzy. Oh, I just want to make some more money. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of chime in on what David said before about the guitar moments. I'm a little older, so I'm in my 50s, and I got to experience the whole Hendrix thing and the whole Clapton is God thing and all that stuff as it was coming up. And so as a teen, when I heard Eddie Van Halen, that was new music. That was taking over the world at that time, and it was something that hit us like a ton of bricks. People had been shredding. I mean, we've talked about Roy Clark before on the show. We've talked about people like that who are shredders in their own right, but nobody had ever done what Eddie Van Halen had done, and he set a bar that suddenly for the 80s had to be, it was this thing that everybody had to jump over top of.
It was a nuclear arms race, is what it was.
Yeah.
It was like the height of the Cold War in guitars. I mean,
yeah, and so when unfortunately we saw then a retraction, a pullback from the solos when Nirvana and that whole movement that came out, and it's kind of cool to see somebody like you, because you're young. I'm not going to ask your age, but you're younger. I mean, Dave here is in his early 30s. He's young enough to be my kid. So it's one of these things where it's cool to see somebody like you who is now holding the torch and running towards doing something new as well.
Thank you. I mean, do you guys are you guys familiar with Gus G?
I know of him, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he's another guy. He's somebody that I really, really look up to in terms of his playing is such a great blend of all of the kind of, the shrapnel guys, but then also, Michael Schenker and guys like that. I mean, Gary Moore. Gus G has such a wonderful combination of all of those influences there. And, I think he and I are probably around the same age. Obviously, his career is doing great with Firewind and the stuff he did with Ozzy, all that, even his solo albums. But yeah, no, it is really nice to see, some younger guys who are kind of pushing that. I guess the younger generation of classic shredding. I guess that's a good way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so Gus G's a good. I'm glad you brought him up because we've actually never talked about him on the show. But I always felt like, so he did his thing with Ozzy, right? Which I think lasted like one album and a couple tours, and then I always felt like he got the shaft. So Zakk Wylde could come back in. And it was like, at some point, I get it. It's all for the fans, right? So like for the Ozzy fans, like Zakk's the closest thing they've got to Randy. And so when, he decides he's going to do a farewell tour and he brings out Zakk, like everybody totally gets it and they understand. But I'm the only guy that's sitting there going, so you're basically just going to like leave this other dude in the dust? And they did it one other time, and I forget who the player is offhand. Right after Randy's death, they brought in a guy that was like, he was their touring guitar player for like 2 tours.
Oh, that was the guy from, You Can Still Rock in America. What's that? Night Ranger. Brad
Night
Gillis.
Ranger, yeah.
Brad Gillis.
Brad Gillis.
Yeah. And like he doesn't have it. I saw an interview with him a while back, and like he doesn't have anything really negative to say about it, but you could tell like he wasn't thrilled with the idea that like he's that other guitar player that played for Ozzy, and that one that's like not on any record. I think he's on a live record or something.
Yeah, he's just like a dash, and that like you said, that kind of stinks. I mean, not to take anything from Zakk Wylde. You remember when we had an Ozzy tribute band on, and the tribute band's guitar player at the time was 15. He just turned 16.
Yeah. His name was Max too.
Yeah, and his name is Max as well. And he just moved to Nashville. I still communicate with his dad, and it's just funny to see that that young. I mean, he's young. When you meet him, I mean, I met him in person, and we spoke. We got him on the show, and really good, really shredding guy. And believe it or not, the Ozzy lead singer for Little Ozzy, which is the band he was doing that with at that time, then kicked his whole band out and hired a whole new band. It was very Ozzy-esque. I just thought it was really funny because the whole band got fired.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So what they've done is effectively, I'm gonna get Max back on the show. I want to get Max and the bass player back on the show, so the guys Terry Hudson, so they can talk. And what's funny is Terry's my age. I mean, we're almost exactly the same age. We're like within a couple of months of each other. And Max is 16, and they're in the same band together, putting out the same energy on stage.
He's so serious when he says that kid can rock. Like, he's ridiculously good.
Oh yeah, I bet. I mean, some of these guys you see on YouTube. I mean, they've got all. You go around YouTube and there's all these videos of like 13-year-old plays Dragon Force, and stuff like that. And it's just crazy.
Yeah. You're like, what am I doing here? Like, I have a friend. We just got back to seeing Paul Gilbert. We were walking out, and by the way, we saw Paul Gilbert, and it was a really small show. There was like maybe 50 people in the whole place, and we're walking out, and so Paul, played the show of his life because he's like, that's who he is, right? Like he got to go off and say things that he wouldn't normally say and all this stuff. So we're walking out of the venue, and I look at him and I go, "Why do I even bother to play guitar at this point?" And he's like, "I feel inspired." Like there's like two completely different opinions on this, But I was just thinking about people like these 14-year-old kids that can play what the Rude Mood or whatever from Stevie Ray Vaughan. And you're sitting there going, I don't like this. This shouldn't even be possible.
Yeah, when I was that age, okay, so Stevie Ray Vaughan was in my 20s, right? I mean that that point, I was in my 20s and listening to that music, and of course I was listening to the kind of music that you guys are playing now, the shred of the 80s, and Stevie Ray Vaughan was such a from way over here coming in and playing a completely different style of music, and it's nice to have somebody like you, Max, who brings these various types of music and puts them together into and still tries to make it something new, goes to a place that other people haven't gone yet.
Thanks. I mean, I think that's one of the most challenging things these days is to do something that doesn't sound like it's just been done a million times before. There are new things that people are doing on the guitar, but I think not all of them need to be done. Maybe that's a good way to say it, but there's originality just for the sake of doing something new, but it doesn't always produce something that's really listenable. But I mean, I guess the longer that music goes on, the longer that guitar goes on. Of course, I want it to go on forever, but the harder and harder it is to do something that's fresh sounding.
Yeah, I think that there was it maybe the mid 2000s to around 2011, 2012, where every band that was putting out an album was like, we're tuned down to like Z. And so now this is the heaviest album we've ever put out. It's going to weigh 450 pounds and you're going to have a 2-man carry on the CD. I mean, it's just ridiculous to say, okay, that's what you did to make it new I get tuning down. I really do. I mean, some songs sound better tuned down.
I play a 7-string.
Right, but and 7 strings and 8 strings are the proof of the pudding, and that sometimes it's a good thing. But I always say the same thing. So for doing something different for the sake of doing something different isn't actually forwarding the music or anything really. It's just doing something different, and I can't help but think it's more like a sideshow at a circus. It's just, look, I can juggle with steak knives. And yesterday I was juggling with paring knives. And tomorrow I'll juggle with hatchets. It's still juggling with blades. It's still dangerous. What are you going to show me that's something new? Oh, we'll set them on fire. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying,
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And I think one way to look at that stuff is if you look back a few years, maybe at the time, if a band went that route, maybe at the time they had one successful album. But now that stuff, it seems so dated now, right? And it's only been a few years. I think when somebody goes for that, like, well, they did this, so we're going to do that too, but a little bit more, it just becomes so redundant and so derivative. It's like taking whatever happens to be cool at that moment and then just exaggerating it. And it ends up just like, you listen to something, or you look at a band photo and like everybody's wearing top hats and mustaches with pinstriping on their guitars, and it's like 2005, and so now you look at that stuff and it's like, geez, guys, why did you have to go that way?
That's exactly the reason that the 80s, like the end of the 80s with all the hair metal bands, went the way it did.
Right.
Because everybody was looking at each other and being like, how more outrageous and ridiculous could we get? And it wasn't just the music. I mean, it was like you said, like top hats and pinstripes. Like they really got to the point where they were like, okay, how tall can I make my hair get? And how much more fluorescent can I be on stage? You know what I mean? And it just got to the point where it just wasn't working anymore.
But what's funny is the bands that did work, the Van Halens, the ones like that, the bands you see today that are still selling a lot of tickets, and they did the shredding thing, but they did it right. Michael Gilbert, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. They could do it in jeans, t-shirts, and plain, sneakers, and their guitars don't have to be fluorescent green anymore. Although Steve Vai, he's got his own thing, and he is his own thing. I mean,
yeah, like he's really risen to, like, he's a Frank Zappa all unto himself at this point. And you're absolutely right, but I think part of that is, Jim, like even Van Halen, they did the spandex thing and everything, like, but you felt like those guys were really dirty and grungy and nasty underneath it. And so when they'd go back to the blue jeans and stuff later, like you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Whereas like Poison, if they were to go back to blue jeans and stuff, you're just like, the hell is this?
Yeah,
like it just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it. But what I want to know is, can we talk about Elon Musk and this project you've put together?
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned this at the top of the show. I have a band. It's a power metal band called Raptor Command, the heavy metal tribute to Elon Musk. And a few years ago, I was just sitting around one day, and I was like reading an article or something like that, and it was talking about SpaceX, or one of the things that Elon Musk does. And they had all these great technical terms in there. And if you go into the just the information about SpaceX, they have such fun naming this stuff, right? And so the rocket is called the Falcon 9, right? And they have the Falcon Heavy. The capsule that the astronauts ride in is called the Dragon. Okay, the engines on the booster are called the Merlin engines. They have all these wonderful names, right? And I was sitting around reading this stuff, and I'm like, man, these would make such great metal lyrics. It's like it's perfect.
Yeah,
like I don't even have to do anything to it. And that idea just, you get those ideas late at night, right? Where your brain is a little bit tired. And then usually you wake up the next day and it's like, oh, that was ridiculous. I'm not
Jim has a story about that.
Yeah, it was one of those ideas. And only, the thing was, when I woke up the next morning, I'm like, you know what? That's actually such a crazy idea. If I don't do it, like someone needs to do that idea. And so I called up some guys, and everybody kind of had the same opinion. It's like, well, that's such a ridiculous idea.
Like, this is going to work. Yeah, this is going to work.
We should do it. And we, make a long story short, we crowdfunded an album, which is now finished, and it's just called Elon, and it's got 10 tracks on it, and it's just like ridiculous, over the top power metal. And there's I'll give you some of the song titles. You can get an idea of what this stuff is like. I mean, the intro track, which is like the big slow building like intro to the album, is called For the Glory of Elon. And then you've got Falcons Over Moscow. You've got Fusion Reactor in the Sky. You've got Summoning the Demon, which is about artificial intelligence taking over. City on Mars. And then the final track is called Cryogenic Guardian, which is my favorite track in a conceptual sense, because it's this long epic song and the lyrics are about that Elon is so important to humanity that we should cryogenically freeze him so we can save him, like for later on. So
Yes.
you know, at some point we'll get into trouble and we don't know what to do, and so we'll thaw him out. And then
With the Boring
he can
Company
solve-
flamethrower?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, I got to say something real quick about that. So Elon Musk takes a lot of heat, but he has got a really good sense of humor about it. And
He would
it's
laugh,
funny
like, he would
because
think
that
that's great.
flamethrower thing, somebody came to, because he is the kind of guy who he loves ideas. That's what he does. It's like the people that work for him, work with him. That's what he wants to do. He wants to get people to come up with new things and new ideas. So somebody said, let's come up with a flamethrower. And so that's what they did. And of course, you should hear him talk about that on the Joe Rogan show. But check out Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, if you are interested.
I'm just waiting for his strain of weed to come out.
Yeah,
That's going to cure cancer.
no, but go ahead. I just wanted to chime in and say that Elon Musk, he would love this. You should send this to him, seriously.
You know, I don't know. I mean, obviously, he's not exactly an easy guy to get a hold of, but I know that some people, like a couple people who work at Tesla, they've told me that they actually have sent it to him, but I don't, you know, I haven't heard anything.
Reach out to
anything
him on
it.
Twitter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
He's
there's
super
that too.
active on Twitter.
yeah, tweet him. Yeah, I would. That sounds like so good, so much fun. I think. Well, first we'll have to link that album.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure,
then
sure.
I have to get it because I gotta listen to that. I got a long drive. I'm going to Gear Fest next.
Yeah, he's driving from Virginia to Gearfest in,
I got 12 hour
Indiana.
ride. So
Yeah, I'll send you a copy, no problem.
thanks.
So let's back up. So we know you cover like a lot of inexpensive gear on your show. Like, what are you using live? Like, what are you normally taking out?
I've got a great Black Star head that I really love for amps. Kind of my, you know, I have a weird mishmash of gear that I use. I've got a Black Star head that I really like, and I've got a Carvin Legacy cabinet, which is, you know, the Steve Vai cabinet.
Yeah.
With, you know, the Celestians, of course, in it. I love that cab. And then guitar-wise, it really depends a lot on the gig that I'm doing.
Sure.
I played for a while. I'm not in the band anymore, but for a while I played in a industrial metal band, and so for that I was, you know, it's like C sharp tuning or something.
Right.
It's funny I say or something because like I'm not even paying attention to what the tuning is. But yeah. So I was using a Schecter. You know, had a Schecter V for that. You know, hardtail bridge handles the lower tunings really well. But then I've got I actually have a couple other. I have another Schecter that I just got recently that I really like. It's an E1. It's like their Explorer sort of shape. And it also has the Sustainiac electronics in it and nice purple quilt finish. So it gives me the 80s vibes that I need. What else here? I mean, I've got like 30 something guitars these days. So it's, you know, everybody's like, well, what's your favorite one? I was like, it's an impossible question.
Yeah, that's why I asked you what you actually use right now. Because I'm the same way. Like, I have 9 guitars right now, and I have 2 that I actually use out of the lot. But like, I have the other ones for other purposes. And you know, you've got more than a few guitars. Yeah,
a lot. And so my primaries are behind me. Can't see the. I've got a Fender Stratocaster I keep in standard tuning and a Telecaster that's a half step down. But I just picked up a Schecter myself. Which,
oh my gosh!
To the mic stand, you can't see, but it's a Monster logo Schecter. And I think Monster did a giveaway because there's only a few of these out there. And you know, but
it's a turd.
Yeah, it's a pickups that are total garbage. But I want to find some decent pickups for it. But as far as the guitar goes, it's actually a nice guitar. It's got
binding.
Yeah, so I'm
gonna say that about it.
Yeah, it's got binding. It's actually really light, really nice. The neck is really good. You're gonna get to play with it, Dave.
I don't wanna,
David. Yeah, well, you're gonna try. I'm gonna force you.
I have caviar tastes.
Yeah, he does.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, we bought a Shengzai, right? Are you familiar with Shengzai? You ever heard of this company, Bad Cat Guitars?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how familiar are you with them, but they're like defunct now, right? Like they've been in business and then out of business and then back in business, and then nobody's actually received a guitar from them, so they're out of business. And it's like a whole dramatic thing. But we did it because in the early days of the show, Jim and I were talking about like, are Chinese guitars really as good as people say they are? So we went out and I put my money where my mouth is and I ordered a Shengzhe. And we totally we basically got what we expected to get, right? So the guitar came in, played okay, needed some work, needed new tuners, definitely needed pickups. It needs a new bridge. I haven't done the bridge yet. That's on down the road. But like, I mean, it's not terrible. It's on par with like what you would get from Epiphone, and it's about $100 cheaper. But you know, there were just like little things like the case didn't fit it right, and just like little stuff like that. But we've been kind of repping, like, because of what Jim and I end up buying most of the time, like these more high end brands, and people are kind of giving us crap because like it's like, well, this is supposed to be the Practical Guitarist podcast.
Yeah, but the Schecter, first of all, the Schecter, the reason I purchased that is because I know one thing about Schecter. You can get them, tune them down, and they'll still sound really good. And I need to get that to drop C sharp. And I've got can't see it on here, but I've got that Telecaster that plays pretty good. That was $120. So it's not. I don't think you have to spend a lot of money. I think it's just sometimes about what you get. One of my favorite basses that I ever owned was a Schecter. It was a Schecter Custom. I think they've gone to Stiletto now, but it was the 5, and I really like that bass. And it was one of the few basses where EMGs in it. They sound really good. So I think now you have a lot of Max. You have a lot of guitars that you get to demo on the channel. And if you had to pick one of your favorite budget guitars that you were going to use, and you can name several if you'd like, what kind of budget guitar or guitars would you use, and in what circumstance, and why do they stand out for you?
Well, what do you guys consider budget?
Well, you know, the ones that are not, you know, anything under $500 is pretty much budget.
Okay, well, that's a lot of options. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's a couple that come to mind right away. I did one a Wolf, you know, WOLF.
Yeah, I think I saw that one.
Yeah,
I saw that. That was really good.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I got that guitar a while ago, and I still have it, and I still play it on a regular basis, and it's really, really nice. You know, the guitar itself, I think has kind of a darker tone because of the body wood and so forth, and the thickness of the body. But the pickups are a little on the bright side, and just between those two factors, it just has a really articulate but thick kind of tone to it.
Yeah, like chunky.
Chunky. Yeah. So that one, the Wolf, is great. And then I also have a Harley Benton Fusion guitar that I got recently. I haven't even done a video on it yet, but I have it, and it's one of these
stainless steel frets and all that stuff.
Stainless steel frets, roasted neck, and that guitar is like about $400. I think it's like $422 with a gig bag or something like that.
And if they did it in the 7-string, the 7-string,
it's ridiculous. I mean, it's a fantastic guitar, and it's actually kind of funny talking about Harley Benton. I just got back like a couple days ago.
I thought you went.
Yeah, from this Thomann Gearhead University thing over in Germany.
Did you get to hang out with Ryan Burke at all?
No, I don't think I did.
All right, so he's the tall, like red-faced guy with beard surfer, you know, dude. But yeah, he and I know each other through podcast community, so I was asking. But,
okay, hopefully I might have spent hours hanging out with him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can't imagine there were that many dudes there. Like,
well, it's kind of funny. There's a very distinctive look. The long hair that's with the bun on the top of the head and then a big beard. There was like 6 guys who looked exactly like that.
Yeah, no, he's blonde though. Like, okay. Very blonde.
Okay. But no, I just got back from that thing, and I checked out a whole bunch of the Harley Benton stuff they had over there. And it's it's really, really cool. You know, I think sometimes people go to the Harley Bentons after they have been burned by buying a Gibson.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for a lot of different reasons. But man, this thing, I have it sitting right next to me here, this Fusion. And it's got, I mean, it's just so, you know.
I wish they did them in a flat color, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
Because like, I don't care about veneer or any of that stuff. Like,
right.
Just give me a flat color. Like, I'd be fine with that for an inexpensive guitar.
Dave and I were talking about Harley Bentons yesterday, and I was looking at
so we're going to Gear Fest. Wednesday, we have a special episode dropping. And last night, we had a big conversation about Harley Benton. So it's really good that we're having this discussion, but our listeners are going to hear us in retrospective talking about it, like, after the fact.
Yeah.
So what I want to say is this, like, we kind of feel like Harley Benton is basically like Gibsons with quality control. Like, that's essentially what it is. I mean, like, they order such large quantity of spec guitars that they can actually quality control them, and they can keep the prices low.
Yeah, I think that's true, and they're also somewhat doing their own designs too. I mean, obviously they do have guitars that are exactly like a Fender Strat with just a different headstock, you know. But they have a lot of other stuff too.
I think the Fusion is pretty unique because I looked at that guitar really long and hard. I just got a Kiesel. That was my last guitar I bought. I bought a Kiesel Zeus headless, 7-string, and I was like looking at Harley Benton and like, man, I just really want something with stainless steel frets, and this is like $400 plus $30 shipping or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's like honestly, I could see somebody if you're a local pro and you're playing like bar gigs and you need like 3 guitars, and you just want to like get a set of 3 for this particular set of gigs you're doing, order 3 Harley Bentons. Like, you'll get through the gigs. I mean, and then you'll have the same guitar, and you can just swap it out if you break a string. It's no big deal. Yeah,
I mean, I had a guy, a buddy of mine, who was over here, and he was playing the Harley Benton. This guy, his day job is that he works at the Fender custom shop. Okay. And he was playing the Harley Benton, and he's like, man, this neck is really nice. Like, he was impressed with it. And it was just, with the finish on the neck and the fretwork and everything. And it's like, somebody like that, you tell them, oh yeah, this guitar costs $400. They fall out of their seat when they hear that.
I'm staring at Jim right now. I can't tell because there's 4 pictures on the screen, but I'm staring at him like, yeah, you know what I'm staring at you for.
Yeah. So I made the statement yesterday, which will go public, that I am going to buy a Harley Benton. I'm going to order one.
I'm not going to let him forget about it either.
I'm going to order the gold top single cut with the P90s in it.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to give it a shot. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Jim, you have like a $129 Squire Affinity Telly that you play, and you've played at gigs.
I know, and it worked well. I played it in front of 5,000 people, and it was just fine. Nobody went, wow, that guy's guitar is a Squire. I hate that. And ran out, and nobody went. As a matter of fact, I had one person, because I had just replaced the other guitar player for this band. I had one person say, wow, you found your new guitar player. It is really good. I was like, no, the guitar is good. I am not good. That thing is good.
What you should do is sand the Squire off of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna
leave the by Fender, but just sand the Squire logo. Leave the by Fender part on there. Yeah, just to be different.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a whole bunch of stuff done to
you were talking about putting a new neck on that thing. Don't bother.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. You know why it's not worth it? Because the neck it has is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing. I think, Max, you could probably speak to this, is that there was a time when you had to spend money for quality. And now we're seeing, and we talked about this before, we're seeing the price point come down, but the quality come up to meet it. And more, after you break that $500 to $1,000 range, but you get above
diminishing
that,
returns.
You've got extremely diminishing returns. And it's just hard to say, because I really want to get a Les Paul with P90s in it, but do I really want to spend $2,500 on a guitar that I'm only going to play like 3 or 4 songs on? Now
you guys can't see it's off screen, but right here next to me, I have a G&L S500. All right, when I bought this guitar, it was like $1,400 new, and I was throwing it up against Sirs, and at like $3,000, and I'm like, why would you spend $3,000 on that? Like there's just no difference. And I've got G&L tributes in the other room. They're like $550. And I'll be honest with you, like if I was making the decision today about what I was going to do, I probably wouldn't have bought the USA one. Except that would there's a reason why I actually bought this guitar. It's a sentimental thing, but I honestly would have like thought really hard about it and been like, why don't I just buy the $550 tribute?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but I think it's a status symbol, right? I mean, it's a musician's status symbol. You know, it's like wearing an expensive watch or something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, these days, I mean, you look at, you know, you made some great points. It reminds me of the Jackson guitars right now. They've got like the JS32 series, which is the low one, and they've got their X series, which is like the next step up. And then after that, then you start getting into the and they've got the Pro series, and then you start getting into the USA made stuff, right? Which is going to run you $2,500, $3,000 for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You get into that X series, it's like, okay, the JS ones, the cheaper ones, you know, a bolt-on neck, you know, made in India or something like that. Still a good guitar, but you get into that X series, you're looking at $500, $600, right in that price range. It's a neck-through guitar, big jumbo frets, really nicely finished. You know, you do some kind of a blindfold challenge between a guitar like that and a USA-made one with, you know, same body and everything. I think almost nobody would be able to tell it apart. It's gotten so close, you know, the difference in quality between a $500 guitar and a $3,000 guitar. Like, unless you're using some kind of crazy exotic materials or something like that, it's just, it's crazy.
And I'm glad you did the video because it might have been your most recent video where you talked about the chips and you've got like 1 year later or 2 years later.
Yeah.
Like after using it on gigs and stuff. And that's great because that's exactly what I was going to point out is like, you always kind of wonder when you go to like the really inexpensive, like Agathis bodies and things like that, are they going to warp? Are you going to get a neck hump? And like, I'm glad to hear yours didn't. And I kind of wonder like if that's a bigger issue with the wood selection stuff on the more inexpensive guitars. I mean, I do know like if you go to a reputable manufacturer, like if I buy a G&L Tribute, right, it's being made by Cort in Indonesia. And Cort's Indonesian factory is probably the most advanced guitar factory in the world. And they just put billions of dollars in it because they build guitars for everybody. It used to be Samick did that. Now Samick is kind of like not doing that anymore. And so, they've got a couple of clients. So what's ended up happening is that, you know, Quartz taken over all that business. So if you can kind of like do your research about the company that's actually building the guitar, even though it's under a different label, you'll know what you're getting. I mean, if I buy, so my G&L Tributes, I can buy a Fender Squier Classic Vibe or something like that, and it's going to be roughly the same quality level because they're both coming out of the Indonesian Cort factory, and they're both probably speccing a similar amount of quality control services. Because obviously, if I'm let's say I'm ESP Ltd, right, and I want to go have Cort build me a run of guitars, I can probably tell them like what level of quality control I want to get, and so they will quote me a price based on that. That's why I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit of that there, but I mean, there's no reason not to buy an import, like an inexpensive import. Now, I think going with a reputable company like Harley Benton or somebody like that's probably a better option for most people. Buying that Shengze, I have to say, was extremely sketchy. That whole process was just hilarious. And dude, I got tags on that guitar that said that the guitar was that Shengze had been in business since like 1981. Shengze's not been in business since 1981. Like, there's no way. And it was so funny because it's like there are all these things about like the factory it was made in and like all this, you know, manufacturing stuff. And it like they had pictures of like the factory, and it was so funny because you could like go online and you could Google Shengze, and there was a video with him being interviewed by somebody on like CNN or something, and he was walking him through the production facility, and it was not what was pictured. It was like, what is going on here? So I get it. Like, they have to have a similar type of marketing to be able to sell to the United States. But I think most of us guitar players would rather than be honest than to be like, here's this picture of this beautiful factory in another country or this factory that Epiphone runs, here in China. But I'm like, I'll be honest with you, like 3 years ago, if you told me like I'm going to buy a Chinese guitar, I would just laugh and be like, why would I ever do that? But now I'm like, all the Epiphones are being made in China. Like it's not a big deal anymore.
It's also because they goaded you into it.
Well, no. I'm not talking about the Xingzhe. Like, believe me, I'm still apprehensive about buying from small builders in China. But my point is that I used to have like this whole thing about like I really don't want to give my money for something that's made in another country because of the resale value, right? Like now, that's not even an issue anymore. I mean, Fender completely blurred the lines in terms of where things are being made.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point there about the sort of the stigma of overseas manufacturing has really gone away in recent years. And there's a guitar that I have now, and I'm gonna be reviewing it soon. It's an Eastman guitar.
Okay.
And it's made in China, but it's like a high-end Chinese manufacturer. It's like $1,000 guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a Les Paul style. But they did a good job because it's not just okay. Here's a Les Paul, and we put a different logo on it. I mean, it's a slightly different body shape, slightly different headstock. But this guitar, no joke, this guitar has some of the best fretwork I have ever seen. I mean, the frets, the fret ends and the crowning on this is fantastic. And it's like, it comes with a nice case. And like I said, these are like around $1,000, like 900 to 11, depending on the model.
Yeah. Do you know what they remind me of? Heritage.
Yeah.
For sure. Very much like Heritage. And if you go to their site, I'm scrolling through right now. They talk about antique varnish and things like that. This is clearly where Jim and I had predicted that this was going to happen. So like 2 years ago when we got the Xingzhe. It's almost 2 years now. It's been about a year and a half, year and 9 months. That someone was going to become the high end Chinese guitar manufacturer, right? Like we saw that coming because we know kind of like how the product life cycle works when they start. First off, like any third world country, they counterfeit, then they create. They start making like quality guitars, and then they innovate and they make something that's like top shelf that people will be willing to buy at any price. And these are, I mean, so I'm looking through here, like there are guitars listed on here, $1,799. I thought I saw one for over $2,000, and these guitars look legit. Like they're slightly unique in the shape, and they have some unique specs. Only time will tell. I mean, you're saying the fretwork is outstanding. Only time will tell if they get picked up here. But I have a feeling like we're gonna see that happen. That there will be like Chinese brands in the States that people will be buying. And so the big thing for me is not really how it looks, because like my Xingzhe is gorgeous. There's some finish flaws in it, but they're like minor. But the big thing for me is like the electronics and the hardware.
Right.
If the electronics and the hardware aren't there, I don't think they can get people to buy in, because you have to replace all that stuff.
Sure.
But I think we might be on the verge of that. I mean, one thing I've been complaining to Jim about is like Gibson owns Kramer, right? I'd like to see a rebirth of Kramer, but I don't think they can do it under a USA brand. I think they have to go to like Epiphone, and have Epiphone bring back Kramer, because they need a guitar line right in that like $750 to $1,500 range that really occupies like a specific niche. And I think Kramer has a good enough like memory for a lot of people, and they're starting to become kind of vintage prized pieces, that it would be worth it for them to investigate that.
Yeah, I think they could go the way that Charvel has gone. Where they've got you can get a new Charvel, like a San Dimas or Pro Mod or something like that, for like $700-800 in that range there, and those are really solid guitars. And then they've got a handful of signature models and so forth, and high end pieces that are that are like a couple thousand or something. But those are like the kind of standout models they have. And yeah, I think Kramer could do exactly something like that.
Okay. So I'm still looking at Eastman, and I gotta say their arch tops are gorgeous. Like they have, I'm not really into these kinds of guitars, but they have some really unique shapes, and they look like they could rival somebody like Godin, and that's impressive. So I'm going to keep my eye on these guys because this looks like a company that might be doing some stuff fairly shortly. So, but yeah, so we'd only slotted an hour for you. I mean, if you want to stick around, we can do another 15 minutes or something. It's not a problem. We usually do like an hour and a half episode, but we make it work.
Yeah, sure. If you guys want to, that's totally fine.
All right, cool. I just didn't know what your schedule is like, and we've had other guests that are like in the middle of like touring and stuff. So, we'll give you another like 15 minutes or something. Jim, do you have any questions you want to ask? Because I've been dominating this thing.
Yeah, well, no, you've been doing a great job of dominating things. Anyway, so yeah, I just wanted to ask, you've got the Elon Musk album that's coming out. Can you tell us a little more about that 80s tribute band thing you've got going on?
Oh yeah, well that's actually, it's not a tribute band. It's kind of funny. I tell people, yeah, I play in this 80s metal band. It's an actual 80s metal band, Halen, and I just happen to be the young guy. I'm like the young guy by 20 years, in the band.
Right.
And it's the way that band works. The other members, I mean, everybody in the band is involved in other projects. So it's one of these bands where when everyone else's, or when everybody's projects kind of quiet down and they get everyone gets 6 months like free at the same time, then we get together and we do an album or we do a tour or something like that. But it's, some of the other guys in the band, Simon Wright, he's the drummer for, in like Operation Mindcrime and the whole Dio Disciples. Scott Warren also is the keyboard player in there, and then Bjorn England plays bass, and he's played for Yngwie and a whole bunch of guys.
That's probably where I know the name from. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really great band. I mean, there was an EP a while back called Karma's a Bitch, which was a lot of fun. And but yeah, there's also like a live album that is recorded and finished, but it's like we have to wait until we do a tour, so we're sitting on it to release that. But that's a really fun band, and it's very very much 80s Judas Priest, Dio.
Yeah, I was gonna say
really in that vibe.
Yeah, that's what I remember because I've listened to some of it. It's been a while. But yeah, they're more like I would say more on the Judas Priest side than like say Iron Maiden or something like that.
Yeah, and I was in an industrial band for about 2 years, although I exited the band recently. It's kind of a funny situation, but yeah, that genre is a really hard sell these days. So it's
Well, we were laughing because I know Jim and I have watched that Hired Guns documentary this on Netflix, and we were kind of cracking up because you think about industrial, like who do you think of? You think of like Nine Inch Nails, right? And those kinds of bands, and Ministry, and they had that section where they were talking about Trent Reznor and like how he would pay his musicians like $100 a day, and they'd have to sleep on the floor of the van and like all this craziness. And it's like, well, I wonder why that music's not popular now. Nobody wants to play it.
Yeah, it's a funny, it's that point in time, right? I compare it to cars. If you're going to buy a used car, like there's that point in time where it's just an old car that nobody wants, and like in a few more years it'll become a vintage car and you could collect it, but it's not quite there yet. But like that music, it's like that late 90s industrial scene, and it's just at that wrong age where it's like it's not old enough to be like really nostalgic, but it's not recent enough to be cool. And so there's just, here I am talking crap about it. I'm sure there's a lot of people who still love that stuff, but it's as genres go, I think it's one of the hardest things to really find an audience for right now.
Well, so gent is obviously like the big thing right now, right? And I don't even really consider that genre in itself. But it's just like overproduced metal, is my opinion. But and I listen to some bands in that genre. But my point is that if I always saw like the industrial acts as being like kind of merging electronic music and like I won't say metal, but like just rock music in general in some cases. And I see like that gent is kind of doing the same thing, and I wonder if like the underpinnings, like the perception behind it, they're looking at not necessarily the electronica of then, but they're looking at like dubstep and that kind of stuff and being like, how can we emulate that? And thinking back, like there's definitely going to be nostalgia for this because like we're still doing the same things. And I could certainly see like Nine Inch Nails doing some sort of like crazy reunion tour where they perform like, you know, all of I forget what the second album's named, but like I could see them doing the whole album live, just like Smashing Pumpkins just did their thing where they did all of, you know, their early hits and stuff, like, and made a big production out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you see a lot of that. Styx did that. You know, they came out, did the whole Pieces of Eight album when they did their thing. Foreigner's done it. I mean, but I'm not sure if they were the first ones. So Pink Floyd did that with Dark Side of the Moon in 1990s. They did the whole Dark Side of the Moon, and then they did music around that. So they opened with like Astronomer Domini, which was a 60s thing. And then they went into Dark Side of the Moon. They did the entire Dark Side of the Moon album.
That's how you know you've crossed over to nostalgia, though, Jim. When you're performing like an album that you did like 20 years ago in its entirety, like that's nostalgia. You're being driven by nostalgia at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Actually, it's a great sales formula. But I'm just saying like that's exactly what we're talking about, and it's playing into this whole idea that, you know, industrial music is kind of like in this gray area between it's just old music now.
And I think you mentioned Operation Mindcrime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one that was done that way. I mean, I love that. That's one of my all-time
That's one of my favorite
albums.
records. I think it's a lot of people's one of their favorite records. And then like they couldn't repeat it to save their lives, and Jeff Tate slowly became Jeff Taint. And that's so and I don't mean that as in like the body part. I mean that as in like he tainted the band and like then broke it up, and then there were two Queensryches for a while, and
that was a weird time.
that was really crazy to watch.
You live out in the LA area, right? You're out there on
Yeah, that's right.
the West Coast. So is that kind of like you're in the musician, obviously in a musician's core of friends and hangouts and stuff. Is that kind of news out there were you following that at all when they were battling it out in the courts? I mean, that was a while ago, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that was a couple of years ago. But yeah, absolutely. I was following that, and I saw like both incarnations of the band. You know, I was just curious. I'm like, hey, let's check it out.
You're like, why not?
See how it stacks up. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. That was a big thing.
I'm glad you asked that, Jim, because I always wondered, because like I don't have like a lot of connections in the music community. Unfortunately, so I had kids like in my 20s, so I kind of fell out of the scene here, and like I'm trying to get back on the horse. It's been a thing for the last 2 years, and it's I don't have any connections to people that are like pro players anymore. Like I used to, but Jim's like, you know, asking that question. I'm always curious as to whether you guys are like looking at what's going on in other bands, like kind of like looking for positions to fill in and like, and or like just to follow along so you know what's going on in the scene, like how close that becomes as part of an activity.
Yeah, it's a pretty key thing. I mean, for me personally, I've been so happy with my success on YouTube. That's become my main focus now. You know, I think of it as it's a way that I can reach people that I would normally never be able to reach. So I'm not quite as I'm not concentrating as much on the touring as I used to. But no, absolutely, people are always talking amongst each other, and yeah, I hate to say it, but there's definitely a people try to put on a certain face for the public and for the fans, and then that's not always reflective of reality and how people really feel about each other. You know, I think most of the time when somebody's like, oh, well, yeah, he's a very accomplished musician. He's really made a name for himself. I really respect him as an artist, but we just have some musical differences, so we're not going to work.
And behind the scenes, like, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah, he's like, oh God, if I have to work with that guy one more time, I'm going to kill myself.
Well, I gotta hand it to Eddie Van Halen on that one. Like, him and David Lee Roth can't even stay in the same hotel. He's completely honest about it.
Yeah, that's true.
So when it came to Hellion, and I want to ask you this just because there's some of our listeners who, they think, okay, how do I get into a band if I'm looking at it? Because as you mentioned, I think that guys from Hellion are closer to my age, right? So how does a guy who's probably in his 30s get into a band with a group like that and who has who already has like a core of musicians? And when you did get into the band, what was your process of having to become a part of the touring process, or at least the club part process?
Yeah, well, if I'm being perfectly honest, there's a certain element of luck to it, because obviously the position had to be available to begin with, and that had nothing to do with me, right? But the other part of it is, like we've been talking, the style that I like to play is more what I would consider sort of classic shred, right? Sort of classic metal stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I had to develop that, and that means that I'm going to be a good fit for that style of music, a band like that. So part of it is luck, part of it is just the choices I made when I was looking at my influences and, kind of deciding what I wanted to play. The other part of it, specifically in the case of Hellion, because Anne Boleyn is the lead singer, and she's this classic female metal vocalist from the 80s. At the time, I was doing some music that featured a female lead vocalist, and musically it was kind of similar. So I think she was going around. I mean, she was asking people, "Hey, I'm looking for a guitar player for the band. Any recommendations?" She talked to somebody who knew me and knew that, well, I'm already doing something that's really pretty similar. So it was, I think when you look back at it now, it's kind of an obvious good fit. But as far as, once I got in the band, I knew that she had some people in mind that, for the other positions, she had some people in mind already. And there were kind of in the beginning, she was trying to get some more of the older members that had been in the band in the 80s and 90s. I met a couple of those guys, and either life circumstances prevented them from being in the band or something like that. But, it ended up being a 80% new lineup, right, in that band. But I mean, for me, the whole thing was great, because I get to learn from these guys who have more experience than me. And I get to hear all the cool stories, and it was a really great thing.
Well, I know that there's a lot of stigma from people who listen to music and like, oh, it's not the original lineup, right? Like, we get this a lot. We hear this a lot from a lot of people about a lot of bands. I can say, like, I went to see the Guess Who. I think it was probably it had to be at least 10 years ago now, right? So they were doing the festival circuit, and they were playing a local festival, and it was the bass player and I want to say one of the singers, and so no, actually, singer had retired, so it was a bass player and like maybe the drummer, right? It was like two guys out of a 6-person band, and of course Randy Bachman is obviously not there, and like, you know what? Honestly, like, it was cool to see him in that configuration, because you get to see, like, okay, so here's the original guys, and like, this is the core of the band, and they're the ones that retained the rights to the name and all that stuff, and you just get this like feeling. It's like, well, there's people carrying the torch. I went to see the Turtles, a similar situation, right? So it was two of the original guys from the band, and then 3 other people. And I mean, of course, Turtles is like 1960s, like mid 60s, and I got to see like Jude Gold or somebody like that.
Playing guitar
for them. Yeah, and I'm like, I would have never seen that. And of course, this was before he blew up. He wasn't even like an editor for Guitar World or a guitar player or anything at that point. And so there's just this guy just like smoking on guitar, and I'm sitting there going, I would have never seen this otherwise. And then later on, now I know who he is, like, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I've seen him before. I think that was Jude Gold with the Turtles. He might have been with somebody else, but I got to see him like a long time before anybody even knew who he was. And it's a really weird situation.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that probably led to him becoming the guitar player for Jefferson Airplane. Well, Jefferson Starship.
No, so I think I've seen him twice, now that I think about it. Because I saw him in a band that opened up for Peter Frampton, too. Same dude, right? Like, I didn't know it was the same dude until he got a little solo spot at the end of her set. And he was singing with a girl that had done some Broadway play about Janis Joplin. So there was like a lot of Janis Joplin cover tunes in the set. And I think that may have been what led him into the Jefferson Airplane gig.
That's a possibility.
Because they were picking up steam. So I don't know what the whole situation was like. But yeah, so like you don't get the opportunity to see new players unless you go to see like some of these hired guns sitting in with old bands and stuff like that.
I think that's true. I think another part of it that maybe some of the audience doesn't always appreciate is, when you get a lineup together, it's a new lineup, and let's say like what you're talking about, there's a couple guys who are original and everybody else is new. It's not necessarily that they're trying to dick over the other guys. It's like maybe they're dead, right? Or maybe they just don't want to go and they don't want to do it anymore.
Randy Bachman, it's same situation. Like he's moved on, and that's okay. And I think that's why I'm kind of crusading against that stigma. It's because I think people don't understand that at some point, like sometimes people just make decisions to move on, and they don't want to retread on past material or whatever. And like that's fine.
And it's like would you prefer for the band to just not exist at all? I think most people, it's like, well, no, I would like the band. I mean, it's like, I'm sorry that it's not the exact lineup that is your favorite lineup or something, but sometimes it's either that or the band is just not going to be there at all.
Could you imagine going see Deep Purple with the Mark II lineup? Like, good luck,
right. That happened to me when I was, I can't remember if I was 13 or 14 years old. Bon Scott passed away. And, everybody got mad at ACD. Well, not everybody. There was a lot of people who got ticked off at ACDC. Yeah. And then their biggest album, I mean, that thing's,
by far and away.
I don't know what's above diamond status, but it's way above that. And it's sold in like 100 million album sales. So I can't even imagine what my guitar playing childhood would have been like without, Back in Black, or For Those About to Rock, or Fly on the Wall, or Thunderstruck, or any of that stuff. Who Made Who?
Now, I will say this though. Look, I'm not a big fan of the franchise band, like Foreigner's doing, right? So we've talked about this on the show, Jim. Foreigner has decided that they're going to license their band name out to another band to perform their music.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
None of the guys want to do it anymore. No,
really? Okay. So last I knew that Lou Gramm, he had a brain aneurysm or something.
He had cancer. And then he came back. They did like 5-10 years of touring, and then they retired, and that's it. And they're not performing anymore. But they decided that the guys that were performing with them at that time, like, we'll just license them. They can do it. So occasionally they do come out and perform with the band, but it's basically like a totally different band.
Well, you and I have talked about that. When a band decides, okay, you know what, we're gonna have a laser thing, a hologram.
Yeah, the hologram
come
show.
Out and do this, and that's just completely ridiculous. The whole Zappa thing with Zappa as a hologram is just ridiculous.
It's honestly what Foreigner did, and I don't know all the specifics of it, so I'm probably talking out my butt on some of this, but like Foreigner licensed their name out to another group of guys. That's just the same thing as the hologram show. That's just it's except you got real people on stage. That's the only difference.
Give me at least one member.
Yeah, dude, like Mick Jones can come out or something,
Right. Exactly. So we've got to ask you our closing questions.
Yeah, they're the best. You're gonna love these.
Yeah. So we've got to ask you, give us your favorite moment of either touring or studio or something that you can share that's your favorite moment so far in your career.
Okay, I'll give you a favorite touring moment. So I was doing a show with Hellion. This was in Michigan, not in Detroit, but like a little bit outside of Detroit.
Okay.
And the venue, I've never seen this before. The venue was a combination pro wrestling and heavy metal show venue.
Awesome.
And so they had 2 rooms, and they were sort of connected, so you could walk between them. One of them had a stage with the metal band would play there, and the other room had a ring, a wrestling ring, and and simultaneously they would have semi-pro wrestling. And at the time I had my big mohawk and everything, and so I'm walking around with like a sleeveless shirt, my mohawk, getting ready to go on stage, and people kept confusing me for one of the wrestlers.
No, you went over here.
Yeah. It's like, hey, when's your fight tonight, man?
It starts at 9.
Dude, I saw you in Chicago last night. You killed it. I hope to see you again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, that's good. We've had some killer ones, but that was pretty good. Like, to be honest with you, I couldn't imagine being confused for wrestler. I've had some people want to beat me up after shows, but I've never.
The worst I've had is, can you show me where the acoustics are? Our other question would be, or is usually, can you share with us an embarrassing moment or a moment where you went, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened?
Oh yeah, well, on the same tour, and I won't say any names, although
okay.
I guess if somebody really wanted to, they could look this up. But the guy who was the road manager on that tour, he was, I don't know, there was one particular night he was kind of jumpy or something like that. But I was playing, middle of the song, middle of the set, I'm playing along. And there was something, I just had to like adjust the strap on my guitar or something like that. So I reached back, and I'm just kind of like I hooked it on my shirt or something weird like that. Not a big deal, but it's just like, I just got to move this thing. So he's off on the side of the stage, the road manager, and he sees me messing with the strap. And in his mind, this was like a crisis that he had to come out and deal with. So he runs out on stage, grabs the guitar off of me, and then runs off the stage with it. And he's like going to go have the tech bring me my other guitar. He thinks there's something wrong with it, right? And so and I'm like, what's this guy doing, right? And so I look at him, and he starts running off, and I start running off after him, like to try and get my guitar back. And then, and of course, this is like in the middle of the song, and everybody's like,
the solo's about to start,
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, this guy's lost his mind. And yeah,
that's a Spinal Tap moment right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, at least you didn't throw your back out,
Oh my
God.
God.
Right. Yeah.
So what have you got coming up that you would like our listeners or us to know about that's interesting? And of course, this is your moment to do your, what do they call it, the embarrassing sales pitches.
Oh yeah, sure.
Shameless
well, obviously,
Yes,
if anybody out there, is likes watching guitar videos on YouTube, and I've got more and more of that stuff coming up. In particular, I think I've got some really cool things coming up. I'm doing a project with a guitar tech buddy of mine here in LA, where we went into the local guitar center and bought the absolute cheapest guitar that we could find. It was like $75, and then within a budget, we're upgrading it to play as great as it possibly can. That's a really fun one I'm working on right now. And all the stuff that I shot recently over in Germany. So if you're into the Harley Benton stuff, and there's a lot of other things, I did a demo with the Charvel Satchel signature guitar, which is really fun.
That I will be looking forward to.
Yeah.
Sure. So lot of stuff, and obviously, if somebody tuned in or if they forgot at the top of the show, Guitar Max. If you just Google Guitar Max or search that on YouTube, all of my stuff will come up there.
Yeah, we'll put it in our show notes as well.
Yep.
So that, anybody who's listening to this episode, if you want to go just click the link in the show notes, you can zoom on over there. We've extended this to all of our guests. If you ever want to come back and plug something, or you just, come in and just talk,
and tell us we were wrong.
We'll have you back on the show. Yeah. Tell us we were wrong. We've had that happen before.
We're wrong. But no, we're
often wrong. We're often wrong, Jim. What are you talking about?
Exactly. We really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love the stories. Love that. I am looking forward to hearing the Elon Musk thing.
Yeah, I'm going.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to go download it for the trip to Gearfest.
Yes.
You know, we don't get a
Excellent.
special episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great having you on. And so we're gonna do our little outro here, which is that I am David,
I am Jim.
and that is Max. And tonight we've
been the Practical
Practical
Guitarists.
Guitarists.
Absolutely.
Excellent.